everybody. Welcome to another episode of Purple Insider. Matthew Coller here, and want to start the show before I dive into what the Athletics' Mike Sando was able to gain from talking with NFL executives about the offseason by just saying congratulations to one of us, Paige Beckers, becoming a national champion today for UConn. I have enjoyed her journey from day one. I mean, I saw her play here as a junior. My wife used to write for The Athletic and cover women's basketball, and she wrote a feature on Paige Beckers when she was at Hopkins. And now today, she is a national champion and very soon will be the number one overall pick in the WNBA. So very, very cool to see that journey for a Minnesotan who went through a lot, injuries, close calls, and then today a champion. So an awesome day for Minnesota and for Paige Beckers. And I saw the Minnesota Vikings tweeted out a picture of Paige Beckers when she was a little kid wearing an Adrian Peterson jersey with the Vikings helmet. So Minnesota through and through is Paige Beckers. So congratulations to her. And I was looking around for something to talk about this evening. And the reason I'm on Sunday night as opposed to Monday evening is that I have something to do tomorrow night that I'm excited about, but also will keep me away from being able to go live. So I decided, well, I don't want to miss out on talking with you guys. So here I am on Sunday evening, and hopefully a few of you are thinking about football and wanted to jump in as well. Plenty of space, all sorts of room on the show this evening for you guys to jump in. Questions, comments, thoughts. I'm sure you got draft on your mind. What do you want to know? And I saw my friend Kevin Seifert wrote about 7 things that he felt like are resolved about the Vikings path and their organization this offseason. Now that we've had the free agency, the press conferences, the owners' meetings, conversations, and all those things. So that means there's a lot to talk about with this offseason still. And what's on your mind? What do you feel like is not yet resolved for the Vikings offseason? Let me know in the comments, and we will get to all of your questions, I promise. But I want to begin with Mike Sando of The Athletic. Every year he does a couple of really amazing articles that bring you behind the curtain of the National Football League. And when I wrote my book, I messaged Sando and I said, hey, can I just send you a copy? Because I've always so much respected your work. I just, want to do that. So I respect Mike Sando so much and the relationships he's been able to build over the years where he can get coaches and assistants and executives to talk to him anonymously for his article. So he always does the quarterback tiers article where he asks coaches and execs to rank the quarterbacks. And that's fascinating. Tons of interesting commentary about what people in the league think. If you were listening before the season, there were some executives that thought Sam Darnold could be a second tier quarterback in the NFL. And they were right that he was with Kevin O'Connell and the Vikings setup. And he also does this piece where he asks about the offseason. And once things are settled in free agency and before the draft, he goes to people in the league and he asks them, or should I say in the league, and then he asks them what they think of other people's off seasons. What's most interesting to them? What do they think of this, that, and the other thing? It's a great piece. Go read it. So interesting. But when, of course, I did Control F, let's go see what these execs are saying about the Vikings, I was a little bit surprised because what I expected to see other teams saying about the Minnesota Vikings was, all right, wow, they've got to this point without tanking where they've got a stacked roster and they just spent all this money around the rookie quarterback contract. And I expected to see a little bit of McCarthy skepticism because that is a complete unknown and would be totally fair. But I did think, since it has become such a model in the NFL for teams to build around the rookie contract, and there's been so much success doing it. I mean, we could go through all of the recent examples of it. Some of the recent examples are amazing quarterbacks who are megastars, but even Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, we know those guys transcend that, but their teams made a lot of it, with Jackson winning the MVP quickly and Josh Allen by year 3 having a seriously competing team for a Super Bowl, Patrick Mahomes stepping right in, that team being as good as they were. And then we've seen even quarterbacks that we don't consider the elite of the elite Even the Houston Texans, look, they weren't amazing last year, but they won their division. They were in the playoffs the last 2 years. They spent a lot around CJ Stroud. And maybe if Stephon Diggs had stayed healthy or their offensive line had been a little better, they would have been a better team. But we saw the Eagles on Jalen Hurts' rookie contract go to the Super Bowl. Not this year, but a couple years ago and lose to the Chiefs. We saw Jared Goff do it in 2018 with Sean McVay arrives in 2017. They get Sammy Watkins. They get Andrew Whitworth. They stack that roster up around that contract. There's endless examples of teams doing this. It didn't come up in the article. I really thought it was going to be the main focus of like, wow, they're doing it. They've been able to pull it off while not having to go to the bottom, which certain podcasters thought that they would have had to tank to get to this point. That's me. But that was not the main subject. So I have pulled a couple of quotes and I will read them to you. And then we'll talk about each one of them. And then I will answer any questions and comments. But the questions don't have to pertain to this. Whatever is on your mind, draft, random opinions, whatever it is. Don't ask me about food because I just don't have good opinions on food. But other than that, whatever is on your mind. All right. Let's start out with the biggest quote of the article from Mike Sando in The Athletic. An executive told Sando, it's like the 2015 Colts all over again. I mean, you guys remember the 2015 Colts. Who isn't talking about how that's a random poll? I got to say, it's a pretty random poll. That was 10 years ago. I'm going to tell you the truth. You can say to me a lot of teams from a lot of years, and I'll be like, oh, yeah, that was the team that did whatever. If you said the 2015 Colts, I'd be like, was there something that they were known for, other than not blocking for Andrew Luck? Like, I don't know. But anyway, it's like the 2015 Colts all over again, signing older guys who have been hurt, who are on their third or fourth contracts. You cannot build a team with older players, especially old players who have been cut because they were hurt. So let's talk about that quote right there. And that has been one of the biggest points of discussion that we've had. You recall a few weeks ago, I went through what Seth Walder wrote, the analytics angle, and grading a lot of the Vikings moves. And the grades that he didn't give that were very high were often for players that had been injured in the past. Now, what Kevin O'Connell had to say about the injuries was that they believe in their training staff to the point where if they bring in guys, they can create, he called it 365 day a year type of plans for them. And he pointed to Andrew Van Ginkel and Aaron Jones as guys that were coming off of injuries that last year played the entire season. He also, Kwesi Adofo-Mensah was the one who mentioned that they see the old and injured thing as a way to get better deals on players that you wouldn't have before. Maybe you look at a Ryan Kelly and the way that he's performed throughout his career, and he would be a $15 to $20 million player. But because he's coming off a year where he didn't play 1,000 snaps and he's over 30, you get him for, I forget what it was. Is it $8 million, $9 million, something like that on essentially a 1-year type of contract? The same would go for someone like Javon Hargrave, who's been one of the best interior pass rushers at his position. But because he ends up getting cut and was coming off an injury, then you get him for a lot cheaper than you normally would have expected. You would have expected he would get 20 to 25 million. Instead, he gets more like 15. It's a real legitimate 2-year contract. There's a lot of dead money if they let him go after 2, but it is only a 2-year contract, so it's on the shorter side. So there's a few things to go through with this. I mean, number one is that injured player is not every player has the same injury. This is important. I mean, Jonathan Allen, he got injured and then he came back in the same season. He had a pec issue. Also, Danielle Hunter had a pec issue, and Anthony Barr had a torn pec that kept him out for the entire year. He came back and never got injured ever again. Every injury is its own entity, as they used to say about interceptions, or Kirk used to say about interceptions. Like each one is its own. Each injury is its own. Aaron Jones' injuries of the past are not the same as Jonathan Allen's or Javon Hargrave. So this team would have assessed each injury as its own. But that's not really my gripe, because I can understand that gripe of looking at it and saying, well, look, they just signed a bunch of old guys. Is that really going to get them over the edge? And a lot of those guys have injuries, which turns up the dial on the potential for re-injury. I don't think anybody debates that. I mean, every single time you got to go under a knife, it's worse for your body and for your future. And as much as I think the Vikings are the cutting edge of cutting edge, they borrowed from the Rams. The Rams had those really low injury rates for years, and the Vikings have brought it over. And I think they do an excellent job of managing their injuries and creating these plans. And it's a cheat code for them. And you look at where they grade for their training staff. It's one of the reasons players sign in Minnesota is the training staff. However, they are not miracle workers. And the way that Kevin O'Connell talked about it the other day was almost like they're miracle workers. So that's one thing. The other part of it is when players are on the older side and have had injuries, there is the potential for regression. And you're concerned about already someone like Jonathan Allen. And last couple years, his pass rush win rate was not the same as it was in 2020, 2021. His PFF pass rush grade, his pressure production, all those things, and especially his performance against the run, these are hard facts. These are not like random, oh, it's an injury. I don't know. But these are hard facts about older players in regression. And when someone has had back-to-back years where they're not the same as they used to be, then you do have to question, is that really the best move? And I think it was Seth Walder from ESPN gave it a D+. And I was like, well, I get where he's coming from with this because on paper, an injury, some regression, he's older, all those things are red flag, red flag, red flag. So I get that part. And even on the offensive side, if you're asking a lot of Ryan Kelly and he hasn't played 1,000 snaps in 2 years, and he wasn't quite as prolific as he was before, when he's at his absolute best, he's as good as it gets in the NFL, but that was a couple years ago. So all those critiques, I think, have merit. The issue that I would take with is a small word, and or a couple words, I guess. It's build a team. In the quote, it says you cannot build a team with older players. The Vikings did not build a team this offseason. That's not what they did. They rebuilt a part of their offensive line. They rebuilt a part of their defensive line with older players, but they did not build the team. They won 14 games last year without these players. And in terms of who they lost in free agency, it was Cam Bynum, but there's Pat Jones. Who else was it? Who else was it that they lost that they're trying to replace? What they're doing with these older and injured players is they're enhancing. They're enhancing. And the other thing is too, there's not a lot of them that are that old. I mean, there's really 3. It's, they're trying to build a team with old players. Well, Hargrave and Allen at a position that does age pretty well, and Kelly. Am I missing something? Am I missing somebody else that was old? I mean, okay, they kept Harrison Smith, but he's got an impeccable health record over his entire career and is still playing at a high level. Okay, maybe you count Harrison Smith too as a free agent, I guess. But Byron Murphy Jr. is 27. Aaron Jones is old for a running back. I understand that, but they're not going to ask Aaron Jones to play all the time because they brought in Jordan Mason so they can have a duo there. And Mason was averaging 5 yards a carry last year. He's also 25, 26, might be 26 years old. So he's not old. And if they need Jordan Mason to be their starting running back because Aaron Jones regresses, well, that's why they've got him, is just in case that they have that. And everybody else, like you're saying in this quote, like they built a team. They did not build a team. They built a team through several very effective drafts. One of them with Justin Jefferson, or high draft picks, I should say, and a lot of other good moves around them in last year's free agency. The main parts of this roster were built by Rick Spielman drafting Justin Jefferson and Christian Darrisaw, the 2 most valuable players in this entire franchise. The current regime drafting Jordan Addison, and on defense, them going hog wild last year with Jonathan Grenard, not old, Andrew Van Ginkel, getting there, but not there yet, I don't think, and Blake Cashman, not old. Byron Murphy, they signed, not old. They will have at cornerback Isaiah Rodgers, Mekhi Blackman, not old. Theo Jackson, nope. Even in the middle, I mean, Harrison Phillips is going into, I think, the last year of his contract, but not an old player. He's a veteran, but he's not an old player. They are developing some interior D-line. On the offensive line, yeah, Brian O'Neill's a little on the older side, but still playing well. And tackles last for a long time. Will Fries is not old. That was where their most money was spent. When you say build a team, that doesn't look like building a team to me. It looks like a bunch of guys who are in their primes with the roster being enhanced. If Ryan Kelly doesn't play well because he's old and injured, that's a problem. If one of Jonathan Allen or Javon Hargrave regresses hard, they did have the other one. They've spent on both of them. But even if those guys are not the version of what they used to be, unless they have nagging injuries instead of just random injuries, they could still be way more effective than what they had on the interior last year. And that's kind of the point. They spent a lot, but if those guys are above average, you don't need them to be top 5. You need them to be above average. Well, last year they had about the worst pass rushing interior in the entire NFL. I mean, Jihad Ward, who was just blitzing on third downs, led them in pressures on the interior by a lot. I mean, this year now they have two of the guys who have been the best in the last decade in the NFL in their twilight, but even if they're effective. So I think that executive going back to the 2015 Colts and saying that the entire team is being built by old players after they signed 3 old players might be a little bit of a reach, a little bit of a stretch on the Vikings offseason. Okay, let's get to another one. Another executive told Mike Sando, there is no more fascinating team than Minnesota because they have 13 and 14 win seasons over the past 3 years, but no playoff win to show for it, and only one division title. I mean, what are we doing here? Only one division title because the other team won 15 games? Come on now. Okay, the playoff part, though, is fair enough. And we have talked about this, and hey, they would have had a home game if the rules had been changed. And I did see on Pro Football Talk today that the league apparently wants the playoff format to change. And they wanted the Lions to put in, or somebody, I guess, to put in that proposal because they don't want to do it this way. It would be really funny if they changed the playoff format because right after the Vikings lost in 2009, they changed the overtime and then, them not getting a home game. And I know they might have lost no matter what. If Sam Darnold freaked out again, no matter what, would have been a lot more comfortable at home. I'm just saying. Anyway, not the point. We'll see if that changes someday. The point is, okay, to say they have no division title is obviously silly because whatever, or one division title. But when it comes to the playoff win, that's a real thing. That is a real legitimate, hey, they're interesting that they've been able to get so far with really excellent coaching and squeeze more out than was there. And if we look at the objective measure, this isn't just me being like, whatever, defending them. This is look at the objective measure of the over-unders for the Vikings with Kevin O'Connell and what they've done versus the expectation. They have won 34 regular season games. When we add up the 3 years of over-unders, it was 6.5 last year. I want to say it was probably 8.5 the year before, and maybe 8.5 the year before that, or 7.5. They've been expected to be a below average or average team every year, and they have 34 wins over 3 seasons, and half of one of those seasons is played with not just backups, but atrocious backups, like bottom 5 type of backups in the league. That's a pretty good sign. It does make them fascinating in the way that usually if you get that many wins and you don't win in the playoffs, the pressure ramps up pretty quickly. And I think that that's actually true. I think that is actually very true. That when you draft a quarterback and you let another 14-win quarterback go, and you don't bring in Aaron Rodgers, which of course, I don't think that was a good idea, but I'm just saying, you don't bring in Aaron Rodgers. And so you turn it over to a quarterback who's never played before, and you spend all this money in free agency, and you give all this money to Kevin O'Connell in the contract extension, all that. There is pressure. But I don't know what NFL city where it's just like, there's just vibes. I'm not sure what any NFL city where they're like, no pressure here. It's all good. I think that's every NFL city all the time, but the expectation has been raised by winning 13 and 14 games. And that is a legitimate point of what makes the Vikings so interesting, because if you go another year, you go another 2 years, with Kevin O'Connell and you have these good regular seasons and don't win in the playoffs, all of you right now could say, hey, if they don't win the playoffs next year, it's okay. But talk to me in January, because that's what you all said last offseason. And then you were flaming mad when Sam Darnold melted down. There is no way to escape what it means to be a team with very serious expectations. It's also a heck of a great place to be, because for years, where were the Vikings in terms of expectations? Oh, maybe they'll be in the playoff hunt. Great. How many times did we talk about this purgatory that they were in from 2019, where they win a playoff game and have a great regular season team, and then meltdown in San Francisco in a year where everybody was about to leave in free agency and their cap was screwed and everything else? And we looked around and went, how are they going to get back? 2020, 2021, we went into those seasons all off season. I was thinking, like, how do I make this into something that sounds interesting as a content creator? And how do I make this interesting? Because we all know what the deal is for 2020 and 2021, especially 2021. Did anyone think that they were going to go anywhere? I thought they could be a playoff team, but that was about it. So now, if the thing that you're saying about the team around the league is, well, they keep winning so much, they're going to have to, do more. Like, well, that's the place that you set out to be. You set out when Kwesi Adofo-Mensah and Kevin O'Connell got here to be in a position where people could say, man, they got the roster and they put everything into it. They've had these great seasons before. It's time to win. There you go. Now we're there. Now we're where they're supposed to be. So I don't know if that was supposed to be. I mean, maybe it's just is it supposed to be kind of an insult, or I couldn't really tell like what it was supposed to mean exactly. But I think it's really about pressure. That, do you have Marty Schottenheimer here is really the question. But a lot of coaches have had this happen where they get their teams through the regular season, get beat in the playoffs, and eventually they get there. Think about what Andy Reid's reputation was for the longest time. Now we do not have that reputation for Andy Reid. But time will ultimately tell. And I generally agree with that. When you have done this much winning and shown this much and put this much investment into the roster, go win. And that's where my standard is set. And that's where everybody's standard should be set. Regardless of whether it's a young quarterback or not, it's time to go. It's time to win the North. It's time to compete for a Super Bowl, because that's the position you've put yourself in. And again, it's a compliment to their work, because there's a lot of NFL cities that are talking themselves into Geno Smith or something like that. Like, well, maybe we'll get back to the playoffs. Like, okay, well, that's a different position. Okay, two more. They were a little bit suspicious. One of them, an executive on Kwesi Adofo-Mensah, said, until a new deal is in place, people will wonder. That is true. That is true. Now, at the owners' meetings, as you guys know, because we did a podcast there and you listen to every single second of every podcast, obviously. At the owners' meetings, Mark Wilf, in a sit down with myself, Ben Gessling, Kevin Seifert, Alec Lewis, and Dane Mizutani in Florida, we talked about Kwesi Adofo-Mensah's contract. And Mark Wilf made it completely clear, with no hesitation whatsoever, that they want Kwesi Adofo-Mensah to continue to be their general manager. And I will say this about Mark Wilf, that I have probably been present for, I don't know, maybe 20 conversations with Mark Wilf over the years. I have not found Mark Wilf to be full of crap. Put it that way. I just have not. A lot of times he lays it out there. I think about Justin Jefferson. When we asked him about Justin Jefferson a couple of years ago, he said, it's our intent to have Justin Jefferson be a Viking for a long time. And that's what they did. And last year, when we talked contract with him, he was upfront, and probably more upfront than Kevin O'Connell wanted him to be, when he said, like, yeah, we're not negotiating new contracts right now, last offseason. So he's usually been pretty straightforward with us when he answers a question like that. So I'm more likely to take his word for it, and not completely, because until we see it, we got to see it. But when he says that he wants the power structure to remain the same, when he's very happy with the leadership, when he wants to get a deal done, he was not waffling. He wasn't dancing around the subject. He could have easily told us, and he knew the question was coming, so he could have easily told us if he wanted to, guys, I just don't really want to talk about this subject. And like, what are you going to do? Right. I'm not going to fight him at a hotel in Florida. I'm just, okay, if you don't want to answer the question, you don't have to. He could have avoided the subject, but he went out of his way to not only address the subject, but tell us how he wanted the power structure to be. So I'm assuming that this deal will get done with Kwesi Adofo-Mensah after the draft, and that should clarify things. But that executive is right that until a new deal is in place, people will wonder. And there are a couple more quotes in there about, well, who's pulling the strings, who's calling the shots, and all that. And I've always found it a little odd is that these types of things have shown up with the Vikings every year since Kwesi Adofo-Mensah got hired. Was he really in charge, or is he really qualified, or all these things? And eventually I mean, if look, and this is only if they sign him to an extension. If they don't, what new information, I'll take it back. But I'm taking Mark Wilf's word for it. If they sign Kwesi to a long-term extension, I think we just got to call shenanigans on all the stuff, right? There's always going to be internal politics to anywhere you work, except Purple Insider, where it's just me. But if you work at McDonald's, which I did once, or a grocery store, which I did once when I was in college, there's always internal, this person has more say than that person and everybody else, and things like that. This person doesn't like that person, every place of work. And there's always different ways that people work together and dynamics and all those things. But if they sign him to an extension, and then we look at the roster as what it is one of the best rosters in the NFL that's been built with a clear-cut plan of Kwesi Adofo-Mensah's bigger picture vision and players that Brian Flores wants and that Kevin O'Connell wants on the field. What am I supposed to say? The GM doesn't know what he's doing, and he's what? Like, or the GM has no power, or something. Like, I don't know. I thought they were supposed to work together to build this roster that could potentially win. I thought that's what they were doing here. But that sounds to me, I think there's always been some people. No, I don't think. I know, because I've been told. There's always been some people around the league who think that Kwesi Adofo-Mensah jumped the line, that he went from a researcher to an assistant GM very quickly. And while a lot of other folks in the league had grinded their way up the ladder, and he ends up as a young general manager in comparison to people who have been doing it and fighting the fight. Now, that's because the Wilfs wanted to go a different direction from the old scout of Rick Spielman. And I would say if the biggest critique of them is that they keep winning too many regular season games and not winning in the playoffs, well, yeah, that says a lot about where they're at. But I've heard it since day one about Kwesi Adofo-Mensah. Well, is he really qualified? And does he know what he's doing? And who's got the power and all these things? And my thing is, as Stefan Diggs said, there's truth to all rumors, I guess. And so there's probably internal politics and different stuff that people hear and they like to share and gossip and whatever else. The only thing that we can judge from here, from our seats, I'm not in the meetings. I'm not the owner of the team. The only thing we could say from our seat is how well has this team done since these two have been placed in power. And we could throw Flores in there as well. These three recently, especially, but even just these two, O'Connell and Kwesi Adofo-Mensah, how well have they done? 14-win season last year. It's pretty good. Huge offseason to fill a ton of different needs that they had to strengthen a roster that they mostly kept together. Drafted a quarterback in the first round, moved on from Kirk Cousins, got their salary cap right for the future. They could do a little better in the first draft they had. That's for sure. A lot better. But aside from that, I mean, you're going to have to use your hands. Point to me with your fingers where the dysfunction is. From the outside, from the roster, from what chance do you have to win? How good is your coach? How good is your staff? How good is the players on your team? They kept Justin Jefferson. They signed Darisaw early. Do you know what Darisaw would make now? I mean, I don't know. These seem like good things to me. I'm just not sure. But the executive is right that until the deal is done, then we can't say for sure that this operation is going to continue. So we wait and we'll see how that goes. All right, one last thing. An executive told Mike Sando the Vikings' interest in Aaron Rodgers, quote, reflected uncertainty regarding J.J. McCarthy's readiness to lead the team. Well, that might be true. I mean, there is uncertainty about whether JJ McCarthy can lead the team. Until he leads the team, we can't say if he can lead the team. That is true. And I don't disagree with that. I mean, I think that when you have a quarterback who has not played and not practiced in a long time and didn't play a lot in college, didn't throw a lot of passes in college, as we've talked about, and has one training camp of second team reps and one second team preseason game, it's pretty hard to say that they were fully locked in, no doubts. This is Peyton Manning of the future. I mean, of course, yeah, I think that's right. I think that there's uncertainty and a little unsteadiness and nervousness. I think that's true. I think there's nervousness about it. There should be. The roster is so good, and you move on from a quarterback that you knew could win 14 games and put you in position to play games as big as they did last year. Who wouldn't be nervous going into this? Ultimately, though, they landed on sticking with JJ McCarthy. But yeah, I think that's right. I don't think that's unfair to say that the conversations with Rodgers also were reflective of thinking, well, and of course in the public they're saying, well, you've got to talk to Rodgers because he's so good. And I don't think that that's disingenuous, that when it's Rodgers and he's had his career, that you don't hang up on him. But I also think it was more serious than that with their discussions. I think the discussions got real inside the building, and that I know that there were people inside the building that were pro Rodgers because they're not sure about JJ McCarthy. The thing about the quarterback position is, I've heard Kirk say it, I've heard KOC say it. When you hold the football in your hands, how many people's jobs are on the line when you hold the football in your hands as JJ McCarthy? There is no more pressure in this universe. This is why when, Shadur Sanders, who I really liked watching in college, but when he goes to the podium at the combine and he says, I turn around programs, and you're like, okay, man, it ain't like that. Or he says that you'd be a fool not to draft me. It's like, I don't know, man. It's hard. It's hard out here in the NFL. There's a lot of pressure on the guy who holds that egg. So, of course, you'd be nervous, because if you've put all this work into building this great team and the guy can't play, you're all in a lot of trouble. So that's probably true. So a lot of interesting comments there. You can go read the article again. Mike Sando does a great job of gathering a ton of different executive commentary. And I just thought, what a group of comments to pick apart. And I got to say, as I consider myself one of the kings of random old team references, where I'll be like, oh yeah, 94. For some reason, I was talking to my wife and OJ McDuffie came up the other day. So this is how deep we're into this. And I was like, oh yeah, that, OJ McDuffie was on that like 94 Dolphins team and whatever. I would have never made the connection to the 2015 Colts. They signed Frank Gore and Andre Johnson and Trent Cole. So there you go. Somebody there was maybe thinking about the 2015 Colts. I'm just saying, like, you don't come up with that off the top of your head. That is quite a reference. So anyway, it's a fun article. I love going through it. Great job by Mike Sando. And now we can get to your thoughts and your feelings about all of that, but also, of course, anything else that is on your mind regarding the Minnesota Vikings. Dan says, haters gonna hate. Well, that's true. Yeah, I don't know if it's I don't know if that is the motivation for somebody's talking about. I think that as general managers, things like that, you're always trying to look for like what might go right or wrong with that team. So when someone asks you about the team, you might say, well, what could go wrong is that they've got a bunch of old players. And they do have a lot of veteran players. But my issue was they didn't build the team with old players, because I actually completely agree with the statement. That statement's 100% true. If you go into free agency with a pretty empty roster and you say, here's what we're going to do. We're going to sign 8 30-year-old guys and try to save our jobs. That doesn't work. That's been done a million times. Steven says, if it's jealousy, do you think other GMs may not want to deal with Kwesi in terms of draft day trades or try to lowball him like the 2022 first round? Well, I do think that when it came to that 2022 first round, that what do they say about, the poker table and spotting the mark? The new GM. If you know the new GM is really interested in trading down, you could try to take advantage. I still think, though, when you look at a lot of the draft value charts, it wasn't so much about that for me. It was, I really didn't believe in the positions that they drafted for where they were as a franchise. Where they were as a franchise at that point, I thought they need everything for the future. And remember, they didn't have Jordan Addison at that time. They needed a receiver for the future. I was very pro Jamison Williams at that time. They need receivers. They need the premium positions, corner, edge rusher for the future, because we knew that Danielle Hunter's contract was going to be up and they didn't have Everson Griffin anymore. They just need guys, but especially like corner, edge rusher, receiver. Like they need these things. They're just trying to fill a spot with Zadarius Smith. They needed more than that. And they went with a safety and it was like, no, that's nope. Because we had seen Sadejo and Harris and then ultimately Cam Bynum fill that spot next to Harrison Smith. So that was my issue. I thought also when you trade out of 12, 12 is a Pro Bowl type of position. That's where you draft Pro Bowlers. Not everyone is a Pro Bowler, but that's where a lot of them come from, is that top 15. 32, back end of the first round, not really where you get the Pro Bowlers. A lot of good players, a lot of average players, not too many megastars, definitely not many guys who are going to the Hall of Fame. There was some crazy stat. I've probably brought it up 5 times on the show, but it just always comes to my mind about there was some crazy stat that like half the Hall of Fame is guys who were drafted in the top 5. And so every pick you go down is farther away from someone who's going to make the Hall of Fame. And I thought 12 to 32, that's jumping way away. The Andrew Booth Jr. pick I thought was good until he told us that he had never been healthy. That was concerning, but that was the right position at least. But then they drafted a guard and a linebacker. So safety, guard, linebacker, like that's not, those aren't the premium positions that are changing your life. That was my issue with that. Deplorable Neanderthal says, hopefully your takes are better than that of a Neanderthal. Did the 2015 Colts win 14 games before bolstering their roster with old guys? Nay. Yeah, that's what I couldn't really make heads or tails of that. Now, look, could the Vikings have these blow up and have them not do what they think they're going to do? Of course they could. Yeah, of course they could. But 2015 Colts that's going back a ways. I mean, I'm sure other teams have spent money on their free agents to fill holes before. The injuries are a real thing. I don't disagree with that. My thing is just that they have all the foundational pieces in place at quarterback, wide receiver, tackle, edge rusher. These are the most important positions on the field. And even corner are not young guys. Isaiah Rodgers and Byron Murphy Jr. are not young guys. Are not young guys. And Mekhi Blackman is a young guy, but they're not old guys. I mean, they're veterans. I don't know. Was I saying young guys? I meant old guys. They're not old guys. Like they're foundational pieces that are in their primes for all those key positions. It's the old guys that are filling the other spots that they needed for this next season, or after last season, their weaknesses. That's what they're doing with it. And the biggest money they spent was on Byron Murphy, who's 27, and Will Fries, who's 27. That's not building a team with old, expensive guys. That's my issue. Aaron says, free agency track record last year was phenomenal. Trust the Vikings. Vegas 6.5 last year, 14 wins. 8.5. My guess this year is 12. Trust in O'Connell, McCarthy. I mean, McCarthy is certainly a wild card where you're kind of trying to split the difference. If you're Vegas, if you're Vegas and you're making an over under, you're trying to say, okay, well, they won 14 games last year, but a lot of stuff went right. They led the league in turnovers. Maybe the schedule was not as tough as we thought it was going to be because the AFC South was a true abomination. Okay. And so we know that they could pump up a quarterback, but we still don't know how good this quarterback is going to be. 8.5. Tough division, 8.5. 12, I think, is fine for a pick. I might go 10 or 11 because I think there will be a learning curve there and maybe some games that just don't work out. But I think if they're anything less than right in the conversation down the stretch, I'd be very surprised. Aaron says, I think that the, quote, risky signings are Jeff Okudah and Rondale Moore, and their contracts aren't going to hurt them. if they don't work out. Allen and Hargrave are former Pro Bowl players. I trust in Flores. Well, that's the thing with the former Pro Bowl players is neither one of those guys has played as well as they did in their prime recently. I mean, Hargrave was out for almost the entire year. The year before that, he was phenomenal, but we have gone through that a little bit with someone like Marcus Davenport. Now, he didn't have the track record of these guys, but there was a little bit of, hey, 2 years ago, this guy was really great. And a little alarm bells go off sometimes when I hear that. Well, 2 years ago, it was great, but now he's going to be back to that guy. That's a little hard. My thing is, though, with Allen and Hargrave, as long as they are healthy, and that's hard to say whether they're going to be 100% or not, if they're 75% of what they used to be, even if they are the worst version of themselves that we've ever seen of them on a football field, it's a huge upgrade. And I think that's what the Vikings are going for. Now, when it comes to price, this is the other part of it. Because they have the rookie quarterback contract, you go into the store and you buy the television that you want to watch the game for more than you think it should cost, but you already had a lot of money in your pocket. Like, I want it now, so I'm just gonna, and I don't know, I'm struggling with the metaphor. Let's say there's one TV left on the shelf and you got to watch the game right now. You're going to pay whatever it takes. You need interior pressure right now today, but you have the money. So you can outbid, you could throw the money on the table and be like, whatever. That's where they're at with the salary cap. That's what they did with these signings. The one that's concerning, I think, is Kelly. Now, he's a great player, and he's been a great player, but from an injury perspective, because if Allen or Hargrave does not work out, there's the other one. They would both have to not work out to be a huge failure. And 75% of both of them, or either one of them or both of them, is still much, much better than what they've had. Kelly is a center. That is such a key position for this team with a young quarterback. That's the one that's concerning. It's also the one that's not that expensive. And Michael Juergens, apparently they like, is from what it sounds like. So K Fouls 77, they can get guys in the draft like Gray Zabel or Derek Harmon to learn behind the older guys. Yeah, I think whatever position they go, they're going to be in a spot where they can either start them right away or not. If they draft Gray Zabel, they don't have to start him at left guard right away. And if they start Derek Harmon, then he can be a rotational player for them. And that would be a really excellent thing to have him learn behind two of the best pass rushers that have been in the league for, how long. Let me get back to your questions in just a moment, but first, got to remind you. Now, I saw a tweet the other day that the receding hairline is now in. Yes. Because of apparently a character on White Lotus. He's attractive and he's got a receding hairline. So here I am thinking, well, what a day for me, right? But, the responses to that were not so favorable. A lot of people not buying it. So if you're in that camp, then I got something to help you out. It's called Hims. If you have lost your hair or you're a receding hairline guy, doesn't mean that you can't find your hair again. Try Hims Hair Loss Solutions, and you'll be joining hundreds of thousands of subscribers who have found their hair again. Hims makes treating hair loss simple with clinically proven ingredients that can regrow hair in as little as 3 to 6 months. The process simple and 100% online, so there are no uncomfortable doctor visits. Start your free online visit today at hims.com/purple insider. That's HIMS.com/purple insider to get your personalized hair loss treatment options. hims.com/purple insider. Results may vary based on studies of topical and oral minoxidil and finasteride. Prescription products require an online consultation with a healthcare provider who will determine if a prescription is appropriate. Restrictions apply. See website for full details and important safety information. Seems like other executives are losing their hair over what the Vikings did this offseason. Am I right? Bradley says, this year is very tough schedule. I'd be happy with 10 or 11 games. Go look at the schedule. You will see. I have looked at the schedule. The other day, I did make a mistake on the show. I apologize for that. I think I said they have 9 home games. They have 8. So that makes it harder. What was in my brain is that they had 8 last year, but the NFL took one and moved it to London. So that was what, because I think they only actually played 8 games at US Bank Stadium last year. Maybe I have it all messed up. I don't know. Blowfishes says, I see that my prediction on your show that the Vikings were interested in Joe Flacco as McCarthy's backup, but would wait until after the draft is now picking up steam. Well, good prediction then, Mr. Blowfishes. Uh, I will remain in the same camp as I have been on the backup quarterback is okay, sure, yeah, that's fine. Joe Flacco's fine. I mean, he's been a backup for some guys that were on the younger side. He was all right. He's got experience and is not going to threaten JJ McCarthy at all. Sounds good to me. He could play if you lose JJ McCarthy for a couple weeks, but you wouldn't want him to be lost for a long period of time because then you're probably going to be in trouble if Joe Flacco is your quarterback. That's fine. Wentz is fine. Tannehill's fine. Whoever they want to get works out for me. And yes, of course, after the draft, because of the compensation uh, formula and all that, it's better to sign him after the draft. But yeah, Joe Flacco's fine. That'll work. Uh, K Foul 77 says this draft is full of D tackles. There are other interior O line later as well. Well, that is the challenge though, is that there's just not a ton of draft capital here to reinvigorate the roster with young talent. And that is something that they're going to have to figure out how to do eventually. This year is clearly not the year to do it. And they have lucked out in being able to get younger free agents like Jonathan Grenard, I think was still 26 when they signed him. Byron Murphy, these over multiple years. So it's going to have to kind of start next year. But since they haven't let tons of free agents go in the past, they don't have a ton of comp picks. They needed to spend in free agency to rebuild big parts of the roster. And it was interesting for Mark Wilf to say that in past years, they kind of looked at free agency as a place to spiffy up the roster, as opposed to now they look at it as a legitimate roster building option. Of course, we know that that goes back to the quarterback. But they do need more draft capital into the future. Maybe they'll get some by trading down. We'll see. I'm not totally convinced of that because, as I mentioned, with trading out of number 12 to 32, you can't go back too far or you are trading yourself out of opportunity. And I did that study looking at the value, the weighted value by Pro Football Reference of picks 15 through 25 versus 40 through 50. And the gap was absolutely enormous over the years. The hit rate was pretty different. So they don't want to trade down too far if they're doing it, but they also need more young players. Steven says, this is what a quarterback on a rookie contract scale looks like. You can afford free agents like this. Other GMs in worse quarterback positions might be crying over spilled milk. Sorry, not sorry. Yeah, that could be. That could be. There has been a little bit of an attitude toward this team. And, I think we can figure out, why. One reason. Every year, the players give the Vikings A pluses. And if you're another team, you're probably pretty annoyed at hearing all the time about the quarterback whisperer, the analytics GM, the culture, the other whatever. I'm sure that it gets a little bit like, hey, what do they want? Which is fine. And I've said that too. But I'm sure that when you're turning on TV all last year and hearing about, as they went down the stretch in the playoffs, about the culture, the quarterback whisperer, the whole thing, and all that kumbaya stuff and whatever else, yeah, maybe you from the outside, these are competitors. These are not your friends who are talking about it. These are teams that want to see you lose. Sean says people question the Vikings the hardest last year about letting Kirk walk. Now that is true. They did. If somebody wants to go back and look at the 2024 offseason version of Sando's article, I wonder what they said. Major questions and going with Darnold, major questions. Yep. Now they're questioning letting him go and switching to McCarthy. That's true. Yep. That is true. Where can you bet the over in California? I don't know. Yeah. Cause it's California. I think Minnesota is also maybe right. We haven't done the gambling thing yet, or have we done the gambling thing yet? I don't know. This is something I don't do. Would be I talk about it, but betting on the team that I cover would be a bad idea. Matt says if Jones, Hargrave, Kelly, and Allen all looked like old mediocre players next year, I wouldn't exactly be surprised. If all of them looked mediocre, I would be surprised. I am not expecting every single one of these to hit. And what they have with each one of these players is they have plans built into that. Like Hargrave and Allen, both looking mediocre and bad. Doesn't seem that likely considering how good they were. One of them maybe is possible, or one of them getting hurt, but signing both of them. And then Aaron Jones having the backstop of Jordan Mason means that you're not just relying on Aaron Jones to run for 1,100 yards again. You're looking for like 700, 750. And Kelly, that one you're a little bit up a creek. Now they did draft and develop Michael Juergens, but that one's a little harder to replace somebody like him. That's a very serious, awesome veteran player that it's hard to just kind of, hey kid, go be Ryan Kelly. It's not easy to do. But for the most part, they've given themselves bumpers. My biggest quibble was just with the phrasing of it. Like, well, they're trying to build the whole team with these old guys. Like, well, if Kelly and or not, yeah, I mean, if Kelly Allen, think about if Kelly Allen and Hargrave are just okay versions of what they used to be. How many fewer pressures are you allowing at the center position? Probably a lot. How many pressures are you gaining on the interior? Probably a lot. Is it worth the exact number of dollars? No, but that doesn't really matter because they're not up against the cap. George says if we avoid cluster injuries, aka the 2024 Lions, yeah. Number one injury recovery is Darisaw. The other injured free agents recovery or secondary. Darisaw getting back to form. Yeah, I agree with that. I believe Kevin O'Connell, the last update, he said that Darisaw is on track. We did ask the other day. I don't think he was referring to Darisaw about the injured players that they signed and said that they all should be ready to go by training camp. So, yeah, no, you're completely right. And that I think is why they brought in Justin Skol, the tackle from the Tampa Bay Bucks, is kind of just in case if Darisaw is not ready to go. We'll see. I mean, ACLs usually they're about that timeline where he should be ready around training camp. But if it was any more serious than that, then I would be a little more concerned about it. But I agree. That's the one we're going to be asking about a lot. That is a massive recovery. And if he has to wait a couple of weeks into the season, you want him to be 110% ready to go, not just a regular, because it's not an easy injury to come back from all the time. We saw that from Hawkinson last year. They eased him in. Steven says, if building younger is the Pats spending $26 million a year on Milton Williams, who was a rotational DT, I'll take Allen and Hargrave. Well, you got to remember, though, the Patriots are in a position where their salary cap situation was even more wide open. So they could do anything they want. I mean, that's a lot of money, but I'll defend that type of move all day long. All day long. I mean, you sure overspend on Milton Williams. What's holding you back? Give him the most money. Try to stack up as much as you possibly can with somebody like a younger talent like Milton Williams. I would take Milton Williams at 26 in that situation over the two older guys because the upside of Williams is going to be higher. If you're giving me $26 million to spend and asking me which one you want, I would have probably gone with Milton Williams. But the other two are really proven players over a long period of time. The reason I'd like Williams is I can have him for a long time, maybe the rest of his career if it works out. But both teams are in the same position. Oh my gosh, they overspent on Milton Williams. Like, who cares? They can. They needed to make sure they got players. They can't just sit around and go, well, that's $1 too many. Well, not when you have how many ever dollars they had in free agency. Digit says analytics about capitalizing on advantages not taken by others via conventional wisdom that are available opportunities for competitive advantage to optimize effectiveness and efficiency. Well, that's what it says in the Webster's Dictionary, Mr. Digits. Yeah. So that's the question is with Kwesi Adofo-Mensah, is he taking advantage of opportunity by getting old or injured players at a cheaper rate? And the answer is probably yes. Now it has to work. Or it has to work at least to the point where they're getting value out of those guys. And if they needed the value, this is the thing. I remember going through this a couple years ago, maybe it was 2021, where I looked at the roster and I said, okay, they need this to go right, this to go right, this to go right, this to go right, and this to go right for them to even be in the playoffs or even be competitive. What are the chances that's going to happen? So now when we do that same question, what do you need? You need health. Everyone needs health. You need JJ McCarthy to be good. You don't need him to be Peyton Manning. You need him to be good. What else do you need? Well, you need this interior line and the run game to be better, to be a serious contender. You need interior pressure to be better. You need the players from last year to play at the same levels, Andrew Van Ginkel and Jonathan Grenard, or at least close. But aside from that, I mean, you're not asking a whole giant laundry list of things that are a coin flip. Like, what are the odds Jonathan Grenard's good next year if he's healthy? Well, good, really good. Justin Jefferson, really, really, really good odds that Justin Jefferson will be great. Jordan Addison. These guys have proven long enough. The guys who really drive the success have proven that they can continue to do so. And that's where you look at, I think, this Vikings team, and you could talk about like making the bet on them or why you think that they could be a contending team is that one of those things is not, wow, if Javon Hargrave does not get 50 pressures, they're screwed. They've set themselves up for that not to be the case. And they could even draft a Derek Harmon as well. So that's why I look at it as being a pretty strong and favorable situation, is that they have not asked these players to be that. Dusty says, how could a question about leadership ever be answered with Aaron Rodgers? The guy is toxic. Maybe you're responding to somebody else too here. Yeah, I think what's been nice is that we've not had to have the Rodgers conversation very much recently. But when I look at that conversation about Rodgers and what it said, I don't quite get to, oh my gosh, they have no belief in JJ McCarthy because they landed on JJ McCarthy. But I also think it's very fair to wonder what JJ McCarthy's going to be and to have the conversation with Rodgers as looking into what are our other options in case we don't really believe in JJ McCarthy throughout the spring or if he gets hurt. That there's that backup option for Aaron Rodgers, and that's why you have the discussion with him. But you're never going to not have questions. And, Sean says that like about Jaden Daniels or Bo Nix or whatever. Like you're always, until you see it, you're never going to know for sure. Mama says no one else ponders the 2015 Colts every night in bed. Yeah, I just didn't think too much about it until now. And now I do. Dusty says, I think if you're going to bring in any young quarterback into a place to try to teach him to lead, wouldn't it be our locker room? They remarked at how much of a natural he was last year during the offseason. Yeah, so that's right. The leader of the franchise is Kevin O'Connell. We can all agree on that. It's Kevin O'Connell's football team. And what we saw last year is him take a quarterback who had no connection whatsoever to the Vikings and was coming in totally cold. And by the end, they're raising him up on the shoulders by the end-ish, which tells you everything you need to know about how Sam Darnold, under the teaching of Kevin O'Connell, was guided into that leadership position. I do think that JJ McCarthy is a more natural leader than Sam Darnold with his personality. I think Sam Darnold is a very kind of relaxed guy, and I'm going to show up and do my job every single day, never throw people under the bus, very likable in that way. But I also see McCarthy as having more of like an outgoing, kind of galvanize the guys, a little more rah-rah type of thing in his personality, where Sam Darnold was more quiet and they galvanized around him as the season went along once they got to know him. But it factor is a major reason that they drafted JJ McCarthy, and the belief that he could be a leader and that would make up for some of the difference in inexperience. He seemed to me like last year, he was leading the team like a franchise quarterback. That's why Kevin O'Connell called him that. And that's how he was acting last year during training camp. So I don't have any doubts about whether he can lead a team from a personality standpoint. Brooks says, but maybe you're just alluding to the idea that like, if you're bringing in Rodgers, that doesn't really fit with the culture in the same way that McCarthy does. And I totally agree. And it's one of the reasons I was against it. Brooks says the Vikings just need Allen and Hargrave to be better than the replaceable DTs they had last year. Think about how much money they spent on those DTs last year. What was it, like $3 million for Bullard and five or so for Jerry Tillery? And those were replacement level players that they brought in. And these are much, much more accomplished players than what they had before. They need them to stay healthy. Jonathan Allen did return. I mean, that is a point when you say, well, they signed injured players. Well, he did play in the playoffs. He got 7 pressures against Jared Goff. Was sort of injured. Let's see. Bob says, sorry, Scott said his wife was screaming in agreement from the other room. I wonder what I said to make someone's wife scream from the other room. Sorry, I didn't mean that the way that sounded. I just meant what a take it must have been. Bob says, first round picks should be day one starters. They should not sit on the bench. Well, it depends on what we're talking about. Because like last year, I had no problem with the way that the Dallas Turner situation played out. I know because it's a first round pick and because of what they gave up for him, there's just a lot of pressure and a lot of, hey, this guy's got to be a star right away because they gave up X, Y, and Z and he was a first round pick and everything else. But of all the positions, the one that has the least production right away across the board in the NFL is edge rusher. And Khalil Mack had 4 sacks in his first year. Like a lot of times, they are a spot that is brought along a little slower. And if by year 2, I always think you should draft 2 years out because you can't rely on rookies to just come in and just take over everything. It doesn't work that way, especially not at 24th overall. So I'm not sure I'm in entire agreement. I mean, if you bring in Derek Harmon and for a year or 2, Derek Harmon is a rotational player who plays 400 to 450 snaps and he's getting after the passer and he's learning to be an all-around player and he's developing. And then in year 3, Javon Hargrave leaves and Harmon is the guy and he plays 700 snaps and he gets 8 sacks and 50 pressures and he's a franchise player by year 3. I'm not complaining about that draft pick. I think that draft pick's pretty darn good. And that's that foundational piece that's young that we're talking about. So they do have to think 2 to 3 years down the road. At the same time, if you did go out and get a starter right away, like Malachi Starks, who's a safety from Georgia. Let's say you get Malachi Starks right away. Well, that guy could start and then develop under Harrison Smith and take over a different role as he goes forward. It's hard to complain too much about that. But there's also going to be rookie bumps for just about anybody, or the same if you draft Tyler Booker or Gray Zabel. Like you can plug and play them. There's going to be bumps along the way and development curves that are required, but they might have to just learn on the job. You can never just ask that guy to be big time superstar right away. Like it happens, but it just not that often. It usually takes 2 to 3 years, as we've seen from a lot of players. Not everybody is Justin Jefferson where it takes 3 games. Dusty says Tannehill doesn't want to be a backup. He said in a podcast that's why he sat out last year. It depends on if he still wants to play football anymore. I mean, no one's going to have him as a starter. So if he wants to be on a football team and earn some money, he can do it. If he doesn't, that's okay. There are 5 Ryan Tannehill-ish level backups remaining, and one of them is going to play for the Vikings. We're just going to have to find out which one it is once that draft gets over with. And you know what? Maybe you guys get an emergency podcast out of it. How about that? How about that? We'll do an because we love talking about the backup so much. We could do an emergency podcast when they sign the backup quarterback. We'll see. Steve says you don't personally gamble, but you're wearing an Underdog fantasy t-shirt. That is correct. Underdog is an official sponsor of the show. And well, now what I said was I don't bet on the team. I don't bet on the Vikings. I don't gamble on the Vikings. I cover them. Now, fantasy football to me is under a different category. If like, okay, on Underdog Fantasy, I'll draft a fantasy team. I feel like that's a little different than going to Vegas and laying down 1,000 on the Vikings over. That to me would potentially spin coverage. I don't know if me drafting Trent Sherfield in the 19th round of an underdog fantasy draft is going to change that coverage too much. Everybody plays fantasy at this point. And shout out to Underdog. Chad says, is this going to be a low movement NFL draft? Not a lot of trades. It's kind of feeling that way, isn't it? Kind of feeling that way. Because if everybody has the same opinion that the draft is strong 15 through 50, and as we know, and as I've gone through, the data is clear. There has not been a year in the last 5 years where 15 through 25 was the same value as 40 through 50. So there's no such thing as it's basically a myth that it's just as strong. Oh, I could get just as strong of a player. Well, the odds are not that high that at 47 you could get just as strong of a player as 24. The odds are totally against you when it comes to that. And that's why I've been advocating a little more stick and pick recently, or don't trade down too far and maybe just pick up a little bit later. But if you want to do the trading down, it's probably at 97 is the area to trade down and stack later picks, because those are more about fit with a team, and teams just have guys that their scouts like and that they pick. But to your point, if everybody thinks that 15 through 50 is not that big of a gap, then why am I trading up? If I'm a team that has the 37th pick, why would I be calling the Vikings at 24 being like, hey, get me up to 24. I need this guy. There's a lot of positions that go multiple players deep, but you never know. It kind of depends on runs, right? Like if there's a run of wide receivers in a certain spot and you're a team that is sitting at 30 that needs a receiver, I don't know who's at 30, whatever. I could figure it out if I thought about it. But if you're at 30 and you need a receiver and you're trading up to 24 for a receiver, maybe you do it because you think we only have 3 wide receivers with first round grades and we need to come away with this. That's what you have to hope for if you're the Vikings and you want to trade down. But there has been no trades with first round picks, right? So far, everyone has their first round pick, which has not happened before. I saw some tweet from Schefter about that. So I think you're right. That there probably won't be that much movement. Skywalking McCarthy, bullish take at the time. 2022 draft wasn't that bad. Booth was a consensus first rounder. Scene was approximately a 32nd overall pick. Bigger note, the scouting department was cleared going in 2023. Well, on draft night 2022, some of you folks weren't so happy with me for criticizing the draft. And the reason I didn't like it was twofold in 22. On the night that it happened, so this is not going back in time, was number one, they moved out of a position where you get superstars. And I just don't like that concept. I think superstars win you championships, not replaceable players you could get in free agency or average players that you can get in free agency. It's superstars. You win with Jalen Carter. You win with Saquon Barkley. You win with AJ Brown. Like, these are the guys that drive your success to a championship. You need to draft that caliber player in order to win. And your likelihood at 12 versus 32 is massively different. So I didn't like it from that perspective. I also would have picked Jameson Williams, which for 2 years we would have fought about the guy before he became good in year 3. So, these things are all journeys, I guess, these opinions. Where I agree with you is Booth, which I thought until we talked to him and he said he was never healthy, I thought it was a good pick. And then we talked to him and I went, uh-oh, that might be a problem. And it was. The Lewis Scene thing, I didn't like the positional value. That's what I didn't like about the positional value. Now, I think their safety spot is a little different now because at the time they still had Harrison Smith and anybody could play next to Harrison Smith. But in the future, after this year, they will not have Harrison Smith. And that's why if you draft Malachi Starks, they also didn't have, at the time, they didn't have Brian Flores, who I think the safety position's a little more valuable under Brian Flores than it was under Ed Donatel. Because he asks his safeties to do a lot of different things, line up in a lot of different spots. So if a Malachi Starks can be dynamic and play in the nickel and play deep or play at the box, that's more important than, say, Ed Donatel, who said safeties drop back as far as you can. In fact, go out of the stadium, stand in the parking lot, and allow the other team to complete all the passes they want. But still, it was a different theory at the time. So that's why I didn't like it that night. But I will say, to your point, the draft is random as heck, man. If you look at number 12 through 32 in that draft, That's 20 spots. There's like 15 busts. It was not a good draft in that area, which I'm sure factored into why they moved down. Now, they didn't get Kyle Hamilton or Trent McDuffie. It's hard to find too many other good players in that draft. It was some offensive linemen who went bust. Jamison Williams just became okay last year. So it was some of the worst luck, though, that you're ever going to see. To have all those guys, I mean, Lewis Cine was a good prospect. I mean, he had the national championship MVP, a 4.37 40. It's not like they drafted some guy that no one had ever heard of, or they reached on a consensus. And this is where I agree with your point, is that it's not like the Dustin brings up like the Ingram pick. And the Ingram pick I thought was really tough because that was so far against the consensus that they were taking their lives in their hands when you reach out that much. But it is bad luck to have Lewis Cine turn out as bad as he did. Now, the funny thing about that is that because Lewis Cine was so bad, they put in position a guy who just made $60 million in the free agency market in Cam Bynum. And because Cine was so bad, they kept Josh Metellus, and he turned into one of their most valuable players. So sometimes the draft gods close a door and open up a window, apparently, right? But it does speak to how, development can work at that position. And that would be your argument. I'm writing about this tomorrow at purpleinsider.football. You want to sign up? It's a great time. But I'm writing about the safety position and the arguments back and forth between, is it worth it for positional value? Is it a position that you could just find? Or would Malachi Starks or Nick Enamware be worth the first round draft pick? Mama says Dallas Turner breakout year imminent. I believe so. And part of it, what I'm basing my belief on, is that they haven't replaced Patrick Jones. If they went out and replaced Patrick Jones, then I would have gotten a little concerned. If they had gone out and got a situational pass rusher and spent $10 million on them, I would have gone, well, what's going on here? But the fact that they didn't do that, and that he played consistently at the end of the season, at 28, 38, 25 snaps, made plays at the end of the season. I don't expect that Dallas Turner is just going to flick the light on and all of a sudden he's got 14, 15 sacks. But there are examples all over the place of guys who were drafted in the first round that didn't right away set the world on fire and needed some time. And I think Dallas Turner is one of them. I mean, it takes a long time to figure out how to beat NFL offensive tackles for a lot of players who are young. And he was only 21 last year. He's one of the youngest players in the league. So I'm certainly willing to give him a lot more time. Blade Runner says the 2022 draft, we had a new head coach, new GM, and Donatel drafted mostly defensive. Listening to Ed was their biggest mistake. And that we don't know what happened inside the draft room and all that. But if you are looking at the way they operate now and how much value they put into Brian Flores' opinions, if they put the same amount under Ed Donatel's opinions, and that's how they ended up with Cine. But look, if you're the general manager, you own that. What you own also, though, is the other players that you've drafted who have become good and the way that you've solved it. As I have said probably many times, the draft is random. There is all sorts of proof of this. Harvard has done studies. I'm serious. I wrote in my book at some point, like there have been studies that have been done on the draft, and the editor was like, is there real studies? And so I sent the editor like, yes, there's real studies on the draft and how random it is. And every time anyone has ever looked at it, is there's no team or general manager who consistently nails every single draft. Now they missed 2022 in a biblical fashion and like, oh my gosh, there was just a tidal wave of busts. But it's how you make up for it. And the way that they made up for it, look at the positions they drafted, and here's how they fixed them. Maybe this is an article at some point. The safety position, as I mentioned, was fixed by two development projects who turned out to be really, really good players. They just fixed the right guard spot by spending money that they have because of their rookie quarterback contract. Who else? Let's see, it would have been Andrew Booth. Now they fixed that by Byron Murphy becoming a better player than they thought, but they're still kind of trying to fix that with Andrew Booth. But you're always going to have misses. How do you deal with those misses? If those misses crater you, then it's a big problem. Mama says, where would JJ McCarthy be drafted if he came out in this year's draft? It would be number 1 or 2, depending on preference of the team. I'm going to be honest, I don't have any feeling for how good Cam Ward is. I watched Ward a couple times, didn't love him. Heard from the draft analyst world, like, I don't know if he's a guy that you typically would draft number 1. But then after he did his pro day, I heard from some people in the league that his arm is really live. I mean, that the velocity and the way he throws the football, it's emblematic of a number 1 overall draft pick. But I watched a ton of JJ McCarthy and interviewed people about McCarthy and did every bit of research I ever could last year on him. So I know way more about what he was as a prospect than Cam Ward. Cam Ward is much older and is much more productive than JJ McCarthy was. It's a little bit apples to oranges because McCarthy is so young and inexperienced that it was a bet on his character and his upside. And we saw a lot of that last summer. And that's the other thing it's hard too is I was pretty skeptical on McCarthy, but then I said on draft night, as soon as they pick him, throw all that out. It's what he looks like at OTAs, mini camp, training camp. That's what I care about. I don't care what I thought about him at Michigan, right? And that's how I'll always do it is the more information, the more my opinion evolves on someone like JJ McCarthy. And even when Kwesi Adofo-Mensah came on this show, he talked about the challenge of trying to sort through the small sample size with McCarthy. But with someone like Cam Ward, you've got an enormous sample size. And there has long been a thing in the league about how many starts and guys that have more experience playing have a better chance of success. So maybe Cam Ward would have been number 1 and McCarthy number 2. I don't know. I'm the farthest thing from a draft analyst. That's why I bring draft analysts on the show. And that's why I read really good ones like Chris Trapasso and Dane Brugler and guys like that who do the job in a genuine way and put the work in. Matt says, KOC saying they'll pick the best player available at a position where he has a chance to play seemed like the biggest takeaway from the owners' meetings. Seem to give really insight into what they value in the first. I mean, I think the biggest thing from the owners' meetings was Mark Wilf saying that Kwesi, not only they want to sign Kwesi to a contract, but they want to keep the power structure the same. I think that was the biggest one. But, well, Kevin O'Connell saying that was also kind of obvious in a way because I'm starting to put together my draft guide for the week of the draft. I usually put out a big PDF of all the players I've been looking at, Vikings targets, the data on them and stuff like that. Sign up, purpleinsider.football. And I'm not including tight ends. I'm not including offensive tackles unless they can play guard. I'm not including linebackers, really. I just don't see any path for linebackers to play for this team except for in the late rounds. I think he was talking about that. And he was giving me a hard time about me trying to convince him and Kwesi to draft a wide receiver because, that's my thing. But maybe that was some of his point you could apply to something like wide receiver was if the guy doesn't have a path to get on the field anytime soon, you can't just take him because he's the best guy on the board. If it's an offensive tackle, you can't take him because he's not going to play. If it's a linebacker, you can't take him because he's not going to play. So it's not true best player available. It has to be at a list of positions. And if you're doing it kind of off the dome, listing the positions the Vikings need, you would start with safety, corner, guard, and defensive tackle. I think those 4 are like the big 4 of positions that they need. Safety and guard are the most pressing right now. Corner and defensive tackle are a little more down the road. So with corner, yes, they have 2 starters. They like Isaiah Rodgers. That's great. But if you have a chance to draft your number 1 corner on the board, other than Travis Hunter, let's say Will Johnson falls and they like him, or Jahdae Barron. I mean, you're looking at potential first-round star for the future to go along with Byron Murphy. I mean, Isaiah Rodgers is a rotational player for his career. And I don't doubt that Flores can find these guys, but that's somebody who's already 27 and who has never played more than 527 snaps. So if you have a chance to take somebody difference making, like corner is a spot. And I look at DT as the same way. Like, yes, they can play next year with their DTs and with their corners, sure. But those are premium positions that if they hit the free agent market, get wildly overpaid. Like, you want young versions of those all the time. I agree with Mike Zimmer that it's never bad to draft a corner. They just unfortunately missed on a few that they picked. Dusty says, I'm surprised I haven't discussed Donovan Jackson more. Yeah, I like Donovan Jackson a lot. I just haven't seen him all that high projected, but maybe the draft, maybe. I mean, the draft analysts are wrong constantly. So maybe he could be somebody who is liked more than the draft analysis world. He could be a trade down option potentially. I like him a lot though. I mean, if you can step in and play tackle at a high level when you're really a guard, that says a lot. Great movement skill. I mean, I've thrown out Zabel, I've thrown out Tyler Booker, but I should include Donovan Jackson in that list. There's a couple other guards that could be there. There's even a chance, I don't know what chance it is, but if Kelvin Banks ends up dropping the tackle from Texas, he's got short little arms. So maybe he can be a guard potentially. Spencer says, what do you think about Jack Jones? My understanding is Jack Jones has some off field problems. And last year, he did not do very well with the Raiders, but he showed a lot of exciting potential when he was with the Patriots. It might depend on whether they think they want to bring him into the locker room. He was very good early in his career with New England, and I guess they did put in for him the last time he was available. So, I mean, this team does have a tendency to roll the dice on some guys like that. And if they want to do that, then okay. Like that, they've won on some of those bets in the past. And if you could get him for very cheap, fill out your corner room. If they signed him, I don't know, like how many of these dice rolls do you want in that room? I guess you want to take as many as you can. He is a very highly talented player. Did not play well last year, though. Jason says, did you hear about that Buffalo beat reporter talk about the Bills trading for Addison? I did not. I did not see that. I've got no indication, and we can always be surprised. I've got no indication that the Vikings want to trade Jordan Addison. If they do, then I'll be surprised. I wasn't that surprised when they traded Diggs because it was going really badly. I don't think it's going really badly with Addison. Of course, the DUI is an issue, but I don't know why you would give up a young player. In fact, intern Clay is sitting in the bullpen waiting to talk about Jordan Addison because he just wrote a huge film study piece on Addison. So we'll talk about that a little bit more in a moment. I don't see any reason why you would trade Jordan Addison at this point. Lewis seen as a ring is very funny, Bob. That's true. It's true. Did he actually get into a game? I don't think he did. Skywalking McCarthy, Linderbaum at 23 would have been a hit. Yeah. Could have stuck in and picked him at 12. That's right. I mean, look, if you redraft anything, you're going to crush it, of course. But I mean, there really were out of 20 picks between where the Vikings traded down, there really were maybe 4 players who worked out. There were not that many. Linderbaum was one, McDuffie was one, but even Jordan Davis, everyone wanted Jordan Davis. He didn't even play much for the Eagles. He got passed by their other guys. So I'm not sure he would have been the difference maker that everybody else thought that he was going to be. Okay, a couple more questions, then we'll bring in intern Clay. He's been very patiently waiting to excitedly talk about his new film piece. Dusty says, I think the other part of the draft is just because a guy does or doesn't work out for a team doesn't mean he would or wouldn't have. For yours, Zimmer would have had Mahomes out of the league. Okay, no, he wouldn't have. No, he would not have. Zimmer would not have messed up Patrick Mahomes. I promise you that. I agreed with most of your statement, but Mike Zimmer knew quarterback play. And the funny thing, you could say that. But here's a funny stat for you, though. Kirk Cousins had a higher quarterback rating with Mike Zimmer than he did with Kevin O'Connell. All Kevin O'Connell did with Kirk Cousins is gave him a lot more confidence in himself, and he performed better in the bigger moments. I thought that's the more leadership power to Kirk Cousins rather than demeaning him whenever he could. But Mike Zimmer knew football, guys. I've heard this about Lamar Jackson. Zimmer would have messed it up. No, he wouldn't have. Lamar Jackson, the 2-time MVP. No, he wouldn't have. He hired Gary Kubiak and Kevin Stefanski to run his offenses. He would not have messed that up. They would have designed an offense that was different. They designed an offense for Kirk that became very efficient in 2019 at his best year. It's just that he did not give him an opportunity to be a confident leader. And I think that was because he resented the heck out of the guy because he took all the money from the defense. That's what it kind of really came down to. All right. Let me get one or two more in, and then we'll go to Clay. Josh says, did you see that Jalen Milroe accepted an invitation to be in the green room? Do you think he's going in the first? I don't think that invitations to green rooms indicate anything. I don't know why, if you're him, that you would do that unless people have told you that you're a first round draft pick. Otherwise, you're just going to be the guy that they get the camera on all the time. This Malik Willis was invited to the draft. I'm not really sure why they would invite Jalen Milroe. Aviation MKF, would you trade Addison for a first and a second? How high is the first? I don't think so. This team's trying to win. Why are we trading players? I don't get it. Why are we trading away players for draft picks when you're in position to compete for the division and the guy has 2 more years on his rookie contract? If the Vikings went 3-14 last year, then I would maybe do it. He's also, how old is he? 20 something? 23 possibly. I'm not trading away 23-year-old 1,000-yard wide receivers who are great complements to Justin Jefferson for a draft pick. It just doesn't make sense. Lou says other GMs want to build during the draft and they think they are better than stock market gambling free agents. Well, I think it all depends on where you're at as a franchise. If you're a franchise that is in the middle or worse, then you want to build through the draft. If you're a team that is ready to go and ready to win, then add those final pieces. That's what the Vikings did. They're ready to win. They won 14 games last year. They're ready to win. Dunn says, hypothetical, Genty or Hampton slips to the Vikings. Well, I would do it for Genty. I wouldn't do it for Hampton. Genty is a prospect that is unlike many others I can ever remember at running back. Probably Saquon is the last guy who's that good. So I would do it for him. Hampton, there's a lot of debate on whether Hampton is actually a first round guy. They've kind of got paired together, but I don't know if they should actually be paired together with their talent. I'm not sure Hampton's going to go in the first. So I wouldn't do it for him. He might be available when the Vikings pick, but Genty, that's a different animal for sure. Sean says if the 2022 draft was a hit, we'd still have Ed and B-Flow wouldn't be here. Yeah, how about that? There is, and that might not be true, Sean, because he might have just been so bad with scheme it wouldn't have mattered. But there's a lot of these little ripple effects to the draft not working out. And one of them, the biggest one, is that Josh Metellus and Cam Bynum became really good players. You know, that was one of the ripple effects. So it's how you make up for it. Garrett says, how come teams don't just punt on picks 4 through 7 in effort to garner more top threes? Because teams don't want to give up top threes. I mean, everybody knows that there's a clear cutoff from day 2 to day 3 where you're getting starters in the first 3 rounds and you're getting projects and long shots in the last 3 rounds or kickers. I don't think many teams want to trade back from their 3rd round back into the 4th, go too far, because the farther you get away from the area where the starters are picked, the worse you get. I get your theory though, like trade your 4th, 5th, and 6th for a 3rd, but I might, yeah. I mean, I get what you're saying, but I think if you're a team that's in the 3rd, you're like, nah, I'm not going to do that. Caleb says, would it be smarter to draft offense instead of someone that fits Flores' defense? He might be gone after this year, or a defender who can fit in multiple systems. I don't think anybody that you're drafting in the 1st round is just a scheme fit guy. I think if it's Malachi Starks, for example, I think he's a transcendent, or Grace Abel or Tyler Booker. Like if you're getting really good talent in the 1st round, you should be getting them to where it's not just, hey, he's a Flores guy. He might be gone after this year, but I also think he's going to be here for a while. We'll see. Okay. I've gotten to the bottom of the comments, which means it is time to bring in intern Clay. And you can continue to ask questions and comments. Clay, former Division I football player at the University of Pennsylvania, where he is currently in his prison cell looking dorm room. You would think for an Ivy League that it would have like cool bricks and that it would be designed. You'd have different degrees in the background and it would just be very Very cool. I guess you know what? That's how they keep you studying on whatever it is that you take at the University of Pennsylvania. So, Clay, how are you?
I'm good. I'm good. Thanks for having me back. I'm ready to talk some ball. How are
Okay,
you?
well, why don't you begin by addressing the questions about Jordan Addison? I don't know why. I think it's boredom why people are talking about trading Jordan Addison, but for an article that is coming out tomorrow, you watched a bunch of Jordan Addison film as a former wide receiver and you brought your insight. It's going to be a terrific piece. I've already read it. So tell me your thoughts on Jordan Addison and his fit with the Vikings and why you would not trade him.
Yeah, I think Jordan Addison is a special player, but being in this specific offense makes him even more valuable. As I was watching the film, like Justin Jefferson gets guarded like Steph Curry gets guarded. It's unbelievable. Teams throw the kitchen sink at him. So that leaves Jordan Addison a lot of 1v1s with the second, third best corner on the team. And he's great at winning those matchups. And it's easy to say, oh, he's left on an island with the 2 or 3 corner, but that doesn't guarantee a win. And Addison, he's shown that he could win these matchups week in and week out, and I think that adds tremendous value to this Vikings offense.
I think what we saw from Addison last year is some growth in the area of fighting through contact, where in his first year, I felt like he got pushed around quite a bit and he still had a productive season. But there would be times where if it was him versus a defender going for the football, that you saw him just get out muscled. I thought he did a better job there. His understanding of the offense grew as the season went along. I think early in the season, there were some hits or misses with that because he was dealing with the injury and coming back and maybe wasn't fully locked in the same way. And his targets were a little hit or miss there. But as the season went along, I felt like his chemistry with Sam Darnold and how he interacted with the way defenses were playing. Because I think what people don't understand is how differently a wide receiver. I think when you said you were going to look at the film, I was like, yeah, be prepared to see some weird coverages because they just do not play coverage the same way against any other team. So you have to be able to fit into that really, really well if you're the other guy with Justin Jefferson.
Yeah, you got to be an intelligent player, and that's exactly what I saw on film. At first, I just thought he was fast, get jiggy kind of guy who's a great compliment piece. But after seeing all the film, you could tell he's a really smart player and he knows how to find his spots.
Yeah, I think what maybe people conflate sometimes with Addison is some of the off field nonsense with being an intelligent football player. I remember interviewing his coach, his wide receivers coach at Pitt, and he said, like, this guy doesn't really do anything except for watch film. Like, that's what he wants to do. He told me a story about Addison coming to visit him and just saying, like, all right, let's just sit down and watch the film. Like, that's what he wants to do all the time. So I think he's kind of a savant in that way. And I would want to go forward with him. Now, there's always going to be that risk off the field. It's another offseason, and every day that goes by, you're wondering, is Jordan Addison got this figured out? But if that is okay, the on the field stuff is extremely valuable. And I also think that the number 2 and number 3 wide receivers, and I will never stop thinking this because when PFF studied it, they found even in the playoffs that the number 2 and 3 wide receivers were more valuable than number ones because teams put all their effort into stopping number ones. So you have to have counters, and Jordan Addison is that. So now here's the thing: you were busy today, and if your mom's watching, she'll be absolutely thrilled when I say this, that you were busy today working on a paper. So I said, hey, I'll write the Clay's Corners questions and I'll ask you the Clay's Corners questions. So here's what I got, Clay. And you can tell me how well I did because this is your bit. So let's start out with this. And Clay's Corner, for those who maybe just watching for the first time, he usually comes up with 4 or 5 questions for me and we go back and forth that are a little off of our main topic since we've already been talking about that for an hour and a half. So here's the first question. Mike Clay of ESPN, friend of the show, ranks TJ Hawkinson as the league's 7th best tight end. Do you agree with that ranking? Do you think he should be higher or lower? And I also want to know who you think will be the best tight end in football next year.
7 initially seems high just because he was hurt and he didn't get in the end zone last year. But After I looked at the numbers and who he's comparing to, I think it's fair. And actually, I would probably put him at 6 ahead of David Njoku going next year. But I think he's like a low A, top of B tier type of tight end in this league. And I think once he gets back and he has more time to recover from this injury, I think he'll fit back into the offense and be a good piece. But I do think some guys are close to kind of being in that conversation. Jonnu Smith had a great final 8 games. So if he continues to be a big piece of that offense, I could see him rising the ranks. And then Mark Andrews was another guy, but his role in the offense is diminishing as Likely's is continuing to grow. So I can kind of see Hawkinson beating him out, and then maybe Tucker Craft, but I'm not too convinced about that one.
Yeah, I agree with you that he is not the best tight end in the NFL. And when you sign the contract, it's like, oh, it's the highest paid or whatever, then you're always going to raise that bar. But if we go back 2 years where he was at when Kirby Joseph went at his knee and tore the ACL, I mean, he was one of the best tight ends in the NFL. He's one of the most targeted, had some of the most receptions. This is a fantasy writer, Mike Clay. So he's doing it from a fantasy perspective of how much, target share he's going to get. So I could see where from that way you would say, well, they've got Addison, they've got Jefferson. You're going to have to really fight for targets. I do think McCarthy is going to lean on TJ Hawkinson more, and they can start from day one of the offseason working together. Whereas Sam Darnold and him never really truly got each other. And I remember him talking about how Kirk Cousins was very detailed with where he wanted everybody in their routes and things like that. I think McCarthy's going to be a little more like that, where Darnold wanted to kind of gunsling a bit more. I think it worked for Hawkinson to be in that one place. So he'll probably be a little better than 7th, but I could see that where some tight ends like Trey McBride are, you're going to lean on that guy over and over and over and over again, him and Marvin Harrison. I don't think that's a bad ranking, and where the Vikings have him in the offense is the right place. The only question for me is just how do you work around the issue with it's not the best blocker, but if Oliver's on the field, it was too much of an indicator they were going to run. I think they ran twice or 3 times as much than they passed with Oliver on the field. They do have to work that out a little bit more. I wouldn't mind seeing Hawkinson on the field a little less and Oliver just playing the regular tight end spot, so it's less of an indicator, and then Hawkinson mixing in as opposed to just all the time. But yeah, I think 7th is fine. Okay, next question for you. Oh, do you have a follow up? Go ahead.
I was just gonna. You asked me about who I think will be the best tight
Oh,
end.
that's right. Yeah, the best tight end. Sorry.
I was gonna add on to, since Hawkinson, you mentioned his run blocking incapable. I'm not incapable, but you know what I'm trying to say.
It's not a strength. It's not a strength. I'm not calling him soft. I'm just saying he's not a strength.
Mm-hmm. And that's why I think Kittle is going to be the best tight end again. It's just he's so dynamic in the pass game, and when he's that consistent of a run blocker as well, it's hard to see somebody else take that crown, especially with Travis Kelce like showing clear signs of decline. I think Bowers will be up there again this year. I think he got to upgrade at head coach and quarterback, so I expect him to take another jump, but it's just hard to see another tight end give more value than George Kittle.
Yeah, I think from a full football perspective, it's not even close. I am really curious though, because I think Kittle is the best tight end in the NFL all around. I'm really curious if Kyle Pitts, and I know this is every year with Kyle Pitts. Is this the year Kyle Pitts? And the answer has mostly been no. But even TJ Hawkinson, through his first couple years, it was kind of touch and go. And then all of a sudden it clicked with him, and he was very good. And I could see the same thing with Pitts with Michael Penix, because one of Michael Penix's cheat codes is that he gets rid of the football and he doesn't take many sacks. Well, that's a tight end's dream. Knowing where your checkdowns are could be a factor there. Danish says a wide receiver 2 is around 22 million average annual value. That's what Devontae Adams got to be wide receiver 2 in Los Angeles. Better find your answers through the draft. It's also a reason not to trade Jordan Addison, because it is very valuable at $22 million a year. That's right. And I agree with finding your answers in the draft. Speaking of wide receivers, we got our first police siren. That took
it's been
10
a while.
minutes.
It's been a while, though. They've kept me to myself for the past few years.
You look like you're in a prison cell, and we hear police sirens all the time. Like we do this virtually. You could just be an inmate. I'm not really 100% sure, but you know what? It's
You would never know. You'd
equal
never know.
opportunity ball talking. As long as you can talk ball, it doesn't matter. You can be an inmate. So here's my next Clay's Corner question for you, Clay. Julio Jones announced his retirement. He is definitely among the best receivers of all time. I don't think anyone debates that. But how about one of the coolest? I think that Julio Jones is one of the coolest wide receivers ever. He had the face mask with the blacked out thing, deep catches, jumping over people. I mean, if they won the Super Bowl against the Patriots, that catch he made, that would be something you build a statue of out in front of the arena and stuff like that. I think he's one of the coolest ever. Who are your top three? And I'd love answers in the chat as well. Who are your top three coolest wide receivers of all time?
That I could go on about this for a while, but number three, I'll go probably underrated. I'll go Deshaun Jackson. Growing up, I just always loved watching super fast guys, and that's exactly what he was. And he had the freakiness to shake guys out of their shoes. So it was just really fun to watch. And it's just when you pair him up with Mike Vick and LaShawn McCoy, other guys who have that sauce, it was just a really fun, cool offense to watch. And also, like, I feel like if you're going to be on this list, you need to have like a signature dope moment. And his was definitely the return against the Giants. Somehow he made muffing a punt look cool. And so, yeah, he's got to go at 3 for me.
He also had a look to him as well. There was something about like a playing style, the way even wide receivers, they like how to dress up and that kind of thing. He was so insanely fast. And if your thing is you're the best at tracking deep balls, running by people, blazing speed, I think that's a great pick. I'm going to start out with a real deep cut here. Randy Moss. I'm not even going to do a countdown. Randy Moss, coolest receiver of all time, hands down. I don't think there's any debate. I mean, you can go back to whatever year you want to go back to. You can look at every recent receiver. Randy Moss is the single coolest wide receiver of all time. This stadium is here because of Randy Moss. This fan base. I mean, the number of people who say, I really got into the Vikings when Randy Moss joined the Vikings. And I know that some of the stuff he did along the way was not the coolest. Running over a parking attendant, like, would not advise, but just in terms of how he looked, how he played the game, and the coolest thing of all time. And Gus Frerotte, who's a former Vikings quarterback, he told me this story once. He said that when Randy Moss would get man coverage, he would throw up his arm to indicate, like, just throw it up to me. And Gus was like, I just threw it. Like, that was obviously, I'm not questioning Randy Moss. I just threw it. And when he would get going full speed and throw up the arm, a man is running full speed, throwing his arm up in the air and still flying by somebody. And then, Dante Culpepper throwing it all the way to the roof, coming down, one-handed catches, the Afro's out game, the mooning, like, just there's so many iconic plays. I had to just pick Randy Moss, hands down, number one coolest wide receiver in the history of the game.
Yeah, I left him off the list just because it was too free. It was too easy to mention him. But when you have a guy like him talking about, I don't stretch, I don't need to stretch, and then he goes out, goes in his stance with no knee bend, and goes 99 miles an hour on the first step. He's definitely the coolest receiver. But number 2 that I had on my list, he's up there. Nobody's going to touch Randy, but Chad Ochocinco, another guy who questionable off the field decisions and stuff, but on the field, just his look and his trash talk. He had the gold grill. Like, who else is gonna change their name to their jersey number? Like, he had it, and the fact that he was, to me, a top 3 route runner in history. When you compare those things, it's super cool.
So with him, this is where there might be an argument for, like, when you're in high school, say. So I was nowhere near the cool kids. I mean, I know way too much about 1990s football teams to have ever been in the cool kids, but you kind of see where it's like the guys who are generally cool, like genuinely, they just are. And then there's people who are trying a little too hard to be cool. I think Chad Ochocinco goes under the category of a guy who was trying a little too hard to be cool. It was Randy is the natural cool. Terrell Owens and Ocho Cinco, they're trying a little too hard. Like, look at me. I'm cool just like
Because he
them.
played for the Bengals.
I mean, I do agree with that. You do have to have extra vibe to play for the Bengals and get yourself any attention. Now, I agree with you on the route running, the actual skill, the talent, the production, all that stuff. I enjoyed some of the act, but I just thought it was a little contrived. I thought there was a little bit of him trying too hard to be like, "Oh, look, see how awesome and cool I am." I'm going to go a very, very different direction for cool, because you could go in a way of like Michael Irvin, playmaker, if you wanted to, and he was, he definitely had that element to him. But I'm gonna go with cool as in a different definition. Larry Fitzgerald. Larry Fitzgerald is cool in the way that he knows exactly who he is. He doesn't need to put on a Hall of Fame jacket, because why does he need to campaign for it? Blocking, deep ball, underneath, deep ball early in his career, obviously not later, but underneath, never drop passes, Mr. Consistent. Every single week you show up, Larry Fitzgerald is just there time and time and time again. He didn't have celebration dances. He didn't have, signature stuff that he was putting out there, wasn't in commercials or anything, just Mr. Cool every single week, always consistent, and that type of coolness deserves credit in our conversation. So Larry Fitzgerald is my second pick in the cool wide receiver draft. Lance Allworth, that's throwing it back. Lance Allworth was cool though.
Yeah, I love Larry Fitzgerald. He was the receiver that I looked up to the most, like growing up, and my dad even put me in wrestling as a kid because he used to wrestle when he was younger, so he thought it would make me tough. And it was just so much inspiration I took from him, and he's just such a dog. But yeah, cool is definitely him. But the complete opposite of cool of that is who I have at number one, and that's Odell Beckham Jr.
Oh
Um,
yeah. Okay. Yeah.
I know he had like a very short window of being good, but he had every little kid in America wanting to dye their hair and get the haircut, and everyone's going, "Yo, Odell me, Odell me!" Like he just had so much influence, and not even like when it comes to equipment, like he was like the first person to bring like popular culture and these like other like fashion brands onto the field and do custom cleats, gloves. He's the reason that receivers stack their socks. Like so much influence. I view him as like an Allen Iverson type, not as good as Allen Iverson, but just the influence he had on the culture of the league. I think he's got to be up there.
I think that's a great pick for somebody who made everybody watch. I mean, when anybody makes a one-handed catch, it's instantly, is that as good as Odell's catch? To have the catch that is so great, and even in your brain, you're like, was it really that great? And you go back and watch it, okay, it was. Yeah, it really was. Probably the most high difficulty reception that has ever been made. The style, the production early on, the personality was not. I didn't think he was like an outrageous personality, but I think just playing with style was something that he did differently from the guys of the past. And to me, it was a little more natural than someone that from that like Ocho Cinco, who seemed like he was trying to kind of make up for insecurity. Where I think Odell just thought he was him and then just was doing it. So that's a good pick, and that's someone that probably every young wide receiver who is in high school watching, I want to be like Odell Beckham. And my third pick, I have gone back and forth on about 15 different guys that I like, because there's some other nominees that I could go like in the same way, like in the same vein as I did with Larry Fitzgerald, like coolest wide receivers. Andre Johnson is definitely one that I was thinking the coolness type of factor, but
About that action.
I'm going to go with somebody who was the least coolness factor, but the highest, like I want to be like that guy when I play sports because he's crazy, which is Steve Smith. I think Steve Smith was a psychopath when he was out there. He rode the boat one time when he scored a touchdown on the Vikings and did this. Was that after the sex boat? It might've been after the sex boat. You know about the sex boat, right? Okay, so you're gonna
I'll
have
look
to
that
use
one
the
up after the show.
I'm not gonna tell you right now, your mom's watching, but look up the Wikipedia Minnesota Vikings Love Boat is what it's Wikipedia's under, and it's not safe for work. So make sure your school's not gonna kick you out if you read that. You're researching for your internship. The long story short is the Vikings, they had a party on a boat and there were some underage people working there. The police did an investigation. That's the very skimming the top of that. It had happened quite some time ago. But Steve Smith, aggressiveness, violent player, first one to jump into a fight, punt returning. Like, dude could take over games like nobody else. And at his size, but also strength, could run through people, could jump over people. They were losing in a playoff game, and they were like, all right, Steve Smith's like our best wide receiver, but we got to just try him on a punt return. Bam, touchdown. Like, he was so special as a wide receiver, and he always carried this edge to him. I thought about picking Hines Ward for the same reason. Like, he always carried this edge to him that was so great to watch. So Steve Smith, Larry Fitzgerald, Randy Moss are my three coolest for different reasons.
Yeah, I love Steve Smith also. He was close to making my list, and just ice up, son. That's all I got to say about him. That's all I got to say.
Yes, exactly. Now there's lots of different ways that you can interpret that. So please, any more nominations is fine. There's hundreds of answers. Let's go to the next question. I got two more for you, as long as your paper's done. Let's go with Shedeur Sanders. All right, so he did his pro day. Seemed like everybody liked his pro day. Again, I've been on the outside of the quarterback conversation, just on the outside of it. I see flashes of reports and different things, but it seemed like Shedeur Sanders had a pretty good pro day. And then after his pro day, when he was being interviewed, he said that any team would be a fool not to draft him. What team would be foolish not to draft Shedeur Sanders? And let me just throw out there that it's got to stop talking like this. He just has to. Yeah, Megatron is a good selection, Steve. We couldn't. I just wish that he had a team that mattered. I have like no memories of Megatron playing because he was so rarely on TV. But Shedeur Sanders saying that anyone who doesn't draft him is a fool, it really sounds like he's kind of desperate to get someone to draft him. But is there a team that would be foolish not to? In the first round, obviously.
It's hard because I look at a team like maybe the Saints or the Jets, but I'm not going to call them foolish if they don't pick him in the top 10. I'm not going to call anyone foolish if they don't pick him in the top 10 because I think he's more of the late round, maybe second round kind of guy. But I think if he does fall to 21, it might be considered foolish for the Steelers to pass on him just because they've been the kings of mid ever since Roethlisberger retired, and they've been dealing with guys like Mason Rudolph and Kenny Pickett. So I think this might be their chance to get the QB of their future and turn things around and maybe get over that hump, that 10-win hump, I guess.
I was thinking Steelers and Saints were the two teams that I thought, how dare you not draft a quarterback? Like, even if there are questions about Shedeur, and there should be, he is a very accurate passer, throws a really nice ball. But even what I read about his pro day was that he played it a little safe. I mean, he showed, okay, I could throw the ball 60 yards. I'm going to tell you a secret. Pretty much anybody could throw a deep ball alone in the gym. I mean, it's just not a spectacular thing. Maybe, someone like Bo Nix showed that he had more arm strength than people thought last year at his pro day, but being able to drop back and fling it up in the air 50 yards, well, I guess you should if you were a prospect, but his accuracy is really excellent. What my concern would be leadership, and it would be also he just takes so many sacks. And I know his offensive line was horrendous. It was so bad, but at the same time, he runs backward. He ran himself right out of a game against Nebraska. And it was at that point where I wondered, can he really do it? And also a lot of his deep balls that were successful are just kind of prayers that Travis Hunter comes down with. I will say I would draft Travis Hunter very high. No one should pass up on Travis Hunter, but it's a factor that the guy who's going to go number 2 overall was Shedeur Sanders, top wide receiver that he was trying to throw to all the time. And the guy made incredible catches left and right. So I don't know that I would pick him at the very top. Here's the thing about the Giants, you're getting fired. You guys are getting fired. Just draft Travis Hunter or draft whoever and hope that they could contribute, Abdul Carter, that they could contribute enough right away to help you. There was a list somebody put out, maybe it was Mike Sando, I forget who, that went through every like top 3 draft pick quarterback and how quickly the coaches were fired after they drafted them. Like, you're getting fired if you're the Giants and you draft Shedeur Sanders. So I don't know what you're going to wait for because you're not going to be there to develop them. That's why somebody like the Saints that just hired a new coach, hey, they have a really exciting young coach in Kellen Moore. Maybe he can work with the Sanders. Son of Beavers brings up Jackson Dart. I would say this for either one. Like, draft a quarterback who has to do it. I think the Saints and Steelers are the teams that have to, absolutely have to. The other teams are so far away. I mean, the Cleveland Browns, like, where are you at, man? You might as well just play Kenny Pickett. You're not close, right? Just play Kenny Pickett and get Travis Hunter and see what you can do.
Yeah, play the Arch Manning game next year. But yeah, like
Right, exactly.
the Giants need to pick somebody for their resume because they're gonna be job hunting next season. So they're gonna be
Right.
look, I picked this guy. But yeah,
They're trying to get to 8 wins to keep their jobs with Russell Wilson. Like, that's all they're trying to do.
yeah, I don't know. It's hard for these quarterbacks out here going at the top of the draft, and when you're already just so dysfunctional and nothing's around you, like Shador's gonna even have an even bigger job to handle. So I like the Saints for him, especially if he could develop under Derek Carr for a year or two. He doesn't have to rush in and get blown up. So I don't know. There's some options for him, but that the ego is concerning. I will say it's concerning, but he is a Sanders. Like it's kind of in his blood to be that braggadocious,
Yeah.
in your face kind of guy. But Sanders Dion at least was also an extremely hard worker and made sure to prove his point and showed up when it was time to show up. So maybe he'll do the same thing and surprise us, but it's not a good look right now.
Deion Sanders may have been the single greatest athlete to ever play in the NFL. I mean, it's just not the same. It's not the same. Like, Shedeur Sanders has to be so sharp. He has to be such a great leader. He has to hit on every single thing because he couldn't run away from you. He is slow. He is not fast. And
You calling me slow?
you actually, I mean, at your absolute best, might have run the same 40 or faster than Shedeur Sanders,
I'm
being a
definitely
D1
running
wide receiver.
faster
So
than Shedeur Sanders. Come
I
on
think
now.
you're running
Anyway.
faster than Shedeur Sanders. I should have, but I can't say he couldn't run away from me because yes, he could. He could definitely run away from me. But the point is, though, that there's a lot of people in the National Football League who are faster than you, and that's not something he's going to be able to do. He's not going to be able to run away and escape. If he could live from the pocket and he could play on time with accuracy and lead a franchise, he could maybe be like a Derek Carr type of quarterback. And you can make the playoffs with that guy, and you could potentially win with that guy. But everything's got to click to be that, to win with that, as we've seen from Derek Carr, where it's like if his team's not great, he's bad. And if his team is great, he can make the playoffs. But other than that, like, that's kind of where you're at. Deion Sanders is just a totally different. Like, if you're doing like a top 10 players of all time, he's in that conversation. He's just so different. It's somebody that could go play Major League Baseball and get hits in the playoffs of Major League Baseball and go play an NFL game. Like, this is somebody that's never been seen in the world before and kind of since. It was like Shohei Ohtani, kind of, where it's just, I don't know. This is someone who's an alien. That's not who Shedeur is. You can't have the same attitude as Deion had. Anyway, last question. Speaking of quarterbacks with attitude, Joe Milton reportedly was traded because he believed that he could compete with Drake May for QB1. Quick story. There was a guy by the name of, I believe it was Bo Levi Mitchell. I think was his name. Let me check. Bo Levi. Is that a Bo Levi? Okay, his name was Bo Levi Mitchell. He was a CFL quarterback. He was very good in the CFL. And that's a hard league, so he deserves credit. He's very good in the CFL. And so he had a great year in the CFL, and the Vikings called him and asked him if he wanted to come and compete, sign with the Vikings and compete for the backup quarterback job. And that sounds great for him, right? Like, wow, CFL quarterback. So he meets with the Vikings, and he told this story on a podcast. And he told the Vikings, I want to compete with Kirk Cousins for the starting job. And they were like, no, we just signed him to a $30 million a year contract, and he's one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. So that's not going to be the case. But you could be his backup. And if he got hurt, that would mean you would play. And he was like, no, if I can't compete with Kirk, I'm not signing. And he went back to the CFL. I'm like, you get what? If you win that job and you're Kirk's backup and you do all right, you could be a backup for years. And instead, he went back to the CFL. So this sounds like Joe Milton to me, where he played.
Was it more so because he just wants to he wants to play and he doesn't want to be a backup, or it was truly just the ego thinking he could?
I think that irrational confidence is a thing that a lot of NFL players have, and you have to compete at the highest levels, an irrational amount of confidence. Otherwise, you'd probably just get scared and quit, which we see a lot of players do by the end of training camp. That's too high on the level. That's turning it up to irrational 11, just like Joe Milton. Bro, Drake May was awesome. You played in a fake game where I saw people, well, he's really good in that game. What? Buffalo didn't even play their starters. What are you talking about? What? That was a preseason game. Anyway, so they traded him to a team that had the highest. It was clearly they hated this guy and traded him to the team where he had no chance and the highest paid quarterback locked in, obviously. Good sense of humor from the Patriots to trade him there. Here's what I want to know from you. Who was the quarterback who you had the most irrational belief in? And the guy could work out or not. It doesn't have to have failed or let you down with your irrational belief. I want to know what quarterback that you irrationally believed in the most.
Yeah. At the start, I won't call it irrational, but I gave him too many chances. And that's Justin Fields.
Yeah.
We coming off the time, it was 2021 when he got drafted. So Trubisky's on his way out. Defense looks pretty good. And I think Bears fandom was like, we just need a quarterback. Like, we're a quarterback away from being competitive. And then they traded up for Justin Fields. And I was really excited because I've kept up with him since high school. I don't know if you ever watched that Netflix show QB1.
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, I saw him on there and he was massive. I thought he was going to be the next Cam Newton. So I was a huge fan of his. And then he went off to Ohio State, continued being a fan. And the Bears drafted him. I was like, this is it. This is awesome. And it wasn't. It was horrible because he held the ball forever and he was slow in his progressions. And I defended him through all that. And then they made the DJ Moore trade. And I was like, you'll see now. You'll really see now. And he still just held the ball forever and didn't get it out in a timely manner. It fell apart. And it was really sad to see. And even now, I'm looking at him on the Jets like, maybe. Maybe. So I don't know. Maybe I'm right. Maybe. But I don't know. It seems pretty irrational to me.
Some good answers. John David Booty. No one said Gino Torretta yet. He was a guy who had a good preseason game and Vikings fans loved. Ryan Leaf, still believe in Teddy. Michael Vick, that one went well for you mostly. Scott Mitchell, Clint Longley, I do not. That's quite a deep cut there from Bob. I'll give you two of them that my irrational belief worked out brilliantly and two of them where it did not. So there's a guy in Kansas City who I really had a thing for in the draft by the name of Patrick Mahomes. So there is a tweet out there where I tweeted that Patrick Mahomes would be the best quarterback in the draft on the day of the draft when the Bills made that trade. I tweeted, I was like, he's going to be the best. I was watching. So I watched the quarterback class a little because I thought maybe there was a chance the Vikings would take one, but I didn't really think so. But I was looking into it and I remember where I was and what I did when I watched the Patrick Mahomes film. Like, I called the wife into the other room. Like, you have to see this, watch this man play college football. Cause I watch more college now than I did then. I barely watched it then. So I just called up a game of his. I'm like, people are talking about this Mahomes guy and I lost my mind. Oh my gosh, this is incredible. This quarterback is incredible. So I believed in Patrick Mahomes. The other one was Lamar Jackson, who I was imploring the Vikings to draft in 2018. I was saying, draft him. He'll be a project behind Kirk. You build him up. You let Kirk go after 2 years when they had an option to let him go. And then Lamar could be your guy because they were talking about him as if he couldn't play in his first year. Turned out he could. Jeff George is a great answer. Kyle Sloter, I don't even want to get into. That was a practice squad quarterback that Vikings fans, I don't know, got bored and started fighting with people about. Tyler Thigpen is a good one. Trey Lance is a good one. So Lamar, though, I had this thing of like, you should always draft a quarterback that you can develop to be the next guy, and he's a great athlete, so forth. So that makes me sound like a genius.
Yeah, those are
Now
two
the
really
others,
good ones to have in your bag.
yeah, it is. It is. The other side of that coin, now people have heard me talk about Josh Rosen. Loved Josh Rosen. Huge Josh Rosen guy. I would have taken Lamar 1, Josh Rosen 2, and Josh Allen would have been my like QB5. I just thought, okay, a big guy who throws it over the mountains, who cares? Sloter was not the guy who kicked the door. That was Taylor Heineke. The Vikings had a backup quarterback who missed time because he kicked a door, and there was a whole funny backstory and whatever. Anyway, so that's one. If you watch, there is a game where Josh Rosen comes back from down 30 points to, I forget who, Texas A&M or something. He was unbelievable in this game. Like leadership, accuracy, guts. He's taking hits left and right. I was like, this is my guy. Terrible. Absolutely terrible. Didn't want to play football once he got to the NFL. Could I imagine Lamar and Zimmer? Yes, it would have been great. Like you guys think that Zimmer just, he didn't hate all quarterbacks. Just kind of hated one. He got along great with Sam Bradford and with Teddy Bridgewater. It really was just one. Tavares Jackson's a good answer. Here's my other one. Jake Locker. I was a huge Jake Locker guy. Yep. Jake Locker. He had toughness. He had leadership. He could run the football. He run over people and everything. The problem was he ran over too many people and got hurt all the time. And the issue with, and another one is Anthony Richardson. I really liked Anthony Richardson. The problem is when you have quarterbacks that get hurt, they don't develop. And then they just get stuck in neutral. And that's what's happened to Richardson. It's what happened to Jake Locker. He just couldn't get better. And then he ended up out of the league. So you win some. Can you imagine Zimmer with good players? Yeah, that's the thing. Like Mike Zimmer knew quarterback play. I remember Mike Zimmer saying to us before the Vikings played the Bengals, he was like, this Burrow is going to be unbelievable. You guys don't even understand. We're like, I don't know. Okay. Because he had barely played the year before. And then there you go. Jake Plummer. It's good. Jake Plummer was pretty good. So it's always a fun conversation when we get toward draft time to talk about the ones we thought were good picks and the ones we didn't. Maybe that'll be an article at some point. So anyway, anything else, Clay? You got to finish up, got to wrap up your article. I'm excited about it. Your article on Jordan Addison. You did a great job with it. That's going to come out tomorrow. purpleinsider.football is the newsletter. That's where that will be. So great stuff, man.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
All right. So keep an eye out for that. Thank you for your time. And I appreciate everybody coming in on a Sunday. Great crowd here tonight. This is what I love about you guys. It's no real big news item. Got a couple weeks to the draft. We're just kind of vibing and talking football. And here is a lot of you to show up and do it. So I'm going to have Jeremiah Searles on the show this week. I am trying to get a really cool guest. I'm going to be on the road a little bit this week, so I'm doing some fans only questions. So if you guys want to hit me up on Twitter with a DM or an email, MatthewColler@gmail, feel free to do it because I'm going to be doing some fans only stuff when I'm on the road. And trying to go live on Thursday. We'll see, but I won't be live tomorrow. That's why you set the notifications. Anyway, and of course, emergency stuff, I'll always be here. So thanks for your time, and we'll all talk again very soon. Football.